Hello and welcome to The Point World Affairs. I'm Tae Sang-mi. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's proposed visit to Seoul is arguably one of the most important events concerning not only South Korea, but also the United States and other neighboring countries like China and Japan. Today we explore the significance and impact that Kim's visit to Seoul will have on Washington, Beijing, and Tokyo, respectively. For that, we have with us Professor Joseph Lee, Professor of Political Science at Hanyang University. Thank you for joining us today.
Yes, thank you for inviting me.
Let's first take a look at this short clip.
The third summit meeting between President Moon Jae-in and Chairman Kim Jong-un took place in September. There, President Moon invited the North Korean leader to visit Seoul, of which he readily accepted.
판문점 선언 이행이 풍성한 수확을 안고 평양에서 세 번째로 만난 나와 문재인 대통령은 방금 역사적인 9월 평양 공동선언에 서명하였습니다. 나는 문재인 대통령에게 가까운 시일 안에 서울을 방문할 것을 약속했습니다.
여기서 가까운 시일 안에라는 말은 특별한 사정이 없으면 올해 안에라는 의미를 담고 있습니다. 김 위원장의 서울 방문은 최초의 북측 최고 지도자의 방문이 될 것이며 남북 관계의 획기적 전기가 마련될 것입니다.
The two leaders maintained friendly relations by even climbing Mount Baekdu together, raising expectations of Kim's visit to Seoul.
노래 제목 있습니다. 백두에서 터미를 해바지하고 한라에서 터미만 해보세요.
President Moon and U.S. President Donald Trump held their sixth summit on November 30th during the G20 summit. At the meeting, Trump also supported Kim's visit to Seoul and said it would serve as yet another driving force for peace on the Korean Peninsula. Trump also reaffirmed his intention to hold a second U.S.-North Korea summit early next year.
김정은 위원장과 함께 남은 이 합의를 다 마저 이행하기를 바라고 또 김정은 위원장이 바라는 바를 자기가 이루어주겠다.
In an in-flight press conference after his meeting with President Trump, President Moon hinted at the possibility that Chairman Kim could visit Seoul at any time, giving way to various predictions over specific dates.
김정은 위원장의 연내 답방은 그냥 가능성이 열려 있다. 그렇게 답을 드리겠습니다.
With President Moon's open proposal, President Trump's support, and the international community all paying close attention to yet another summit between the two Korean leaders. On this week's The Point World Affairs, we explore the dilemmas facing the North Korean leader, as well as how his visit can affect the second U.S.-North Korea summit and progress on denuclearization.
Professor Lee, so Kim Jong-un's visit to Seoul was a promise made back in September between the two Korean leaders at the Inter-Korean Summit in Pyongyang. What do you think about this visit? Is it going to be a big game changer in the future inter-Korean relations?
Yes, Kim Jong-un's visit to Seoul is clearly a positive milestone, the first time that a North Korean leader has visited Seoul. At the same time, I remain skeptical that this will be a fundamental game changer. President Moon hopes that Kim Jong-un visiting Seoul will encourage him to make additional concessions to the United States to get denuclearization further along. However, I believe that Kim Jong-un will not make any further concessions unless he receives corresponding concessions from the United States. So far, North Korea has suspended nuclear and missile tests. It has detonated its site, and it has also repatriated the remains of U.S. soldiers to the U.S. government. In return, the United States has suspended war exercises with South Korea. For the next step, the United States wants North Korea to produce a complete list of its nuclear and missile material. However, Kim Jong-un feels that we have done enough. We want a corresponding concession from the United States, such as an end of the war declaration, officially ending the Korean War, and the lifting of U.S. sanctions. So right now, North Korea and the United States are at a standoff.
Okay, let's hear what international experts think about this summit.
Yeah.
For South Korea, Kim Jong-un's visit to Seoul is seen as an event that will mark the pinnacle of peace in inter-Korean relations, as there has never been a case where a North Korean leader set foot in South Korea. Thus, Kim's visit carries a very important symbolic meaning of peace and resolution to military tensions. In fact, according to a survey conducted by Real Meter, 6 out of 10 South Koreans welcome Kim Jong-un's visit to Seoul, saying that it will help the two Koreas towards unification and establish peace on the Korean peninsula. His visit is also an important event for the U.S. as well, as it's believed to serve as a momentum for the second U.S.-North Korea summit. That's because previous examples show inter-Korean summits have frequently led to breakthroughs in Washington's denuclearization talks with Pyongyang, for example in the form of the Singapore summit and in other occasions. Many analysts say this is also the reason why President Trump has been fervently supporting Kim's visit to Seoul. And it's not just America. Member countries of the six-party talks are also paying close attention to the Kim Jong-un's visit. President Xi Jinping in particular is known to have told President Trump that China will fully back the U.S. on any issues relating to North Korea. With Mr. Xi set to visit both North and South Korea in 2019, Kim Jong-un's visit to Seoul is of particular interest. What's more, Japan, which has not made much progress in conjuring good relations with North Korea, is also closely following how the development of inter-Korean relations will affect North Korea-Japan relations as a whole. We connect with experts from the U.S., China, and Japan to discuss how Kim Jong-un's potential visit to Seoul can impact their country's domestic politics and the significance behind such a historic visit.
Joining me now are Harry Kazianis, the Director of Defense Studies at the Center for National Interest in the U.S., Joseph Chang, the Chair Professor of Political Science at City University of Hong Kong, and Jiro Takai, Professor of Social Psychology from Nagoya University in Japan. Now, the first question is for all of you. What is the significance of Kim's visit to Seoul for Washington, for Beijing, and for Tokyo?
I think it would be a game changer, to be honest with you. I think it'd be one of the things that the United States could encourage in order to really secure that second Trump-Kim Jong-un summit. I think for South Korea, it's probably even more of a game changer. You know, when I think about the third inter-Korean summit, and I think about the meetings between President Moon and Kim Jong-un, the visuals were stunning. And I think it's the visuals that will help move this process forward. I mean, seeing President Moon and Kim Jong-un in Pyongyang, with President Moon, you know, waving to large crowds in a drop-top convertible Mercedes, or President Moon giving, you know, a big speech in what is essentially the biggest stadium on the planet with Kim Jong-un. I mean, it's those visuals that change people's perspectives. And it's those visuals that change people's minds and, you know, give people hope that there can be a détente with North Korea. So I think if Kim does come to Seoul, which I think he really will, I think it really can lock in a lot of the gains that we've seen this year.
For Beijing?
Well, China basically welcomes the progress of denuclearization in the Korean peninsula. But at the same time, China would like to have a part to play in the negotiations concerned. The Chinese leadership understands that at the moment, the negotiations are stalled in the sense that the United States insists on the complete verification of the denuclearization process before it will lift sanctions against North Korea. This is certainly not acceptable to North Korea, and that is why President Moon Jae-in is trying very hard to maintain the momentum of negotiations. For the moment, the Chinese leadership probably will monitor the progress. It understands that this will be a fairly long, drawn-out process full of twists and turns, and therefore it will not be too eager to intervene rather abruptly, rather strongly at this stage, but it will certainly indicate to North Korea that it would like to have a part to play. And I believe the same message will also be sent to the South Korean president and perhaps even to President Donald Trump as well.
Professor Takai, what's the significance behind Kim's visit to Seoul for Japan?
Oh, I think the significance is that Japan is going to be left out in the cold. they've been long enemies between the North and the South. They've been long enemies, and so has Japan. And now that the South has sided with the North and things are going well, Japan is going to be left alone, essentially because Trump is making close ties with Kim Jong-un as well. And as a result, the only enemy to North Korea will be Japan. And politically, that doesn't sound very good. And psychologically, we have a theory called the social identity theory, in which we call in-groups and out-groups. And in-groups are members of your friends, and then the people who are enemies are called the out-group. And Japan is the only out-group now that everybody has become an in-group. So you have a big group of friends, and they're on good terms with each other. And the old enemy, Japan, remains the enemy. And now that the North and South have created an alliance, perhaps maybe they could go after Japan regarding some of the war responsibilities during World War II.
Professor Yi, what do you think about their opinions?
Yes, they made very excellent comments. I'd like to respond to them one by one. I partly disagree with Dr. Harry Kazianis from the United States. He argues that he stresses the visuals and how it may lock in these positive gains. At the same time, the visuals are very powerful, such as from the third summit, where Kim Jong-un and Moon Jae-in, they embraced each other. They went up the Paektusan mountain. They made finger love signs. But these visuals can be very powerful also in a negative way. I think that these visuals suggest to governments in Japan and United States that maybe Moon Jae-in is not really looking out for the interests of the Western allies. And so I think the visuals has a very mixed impact, because the bottom line is that if you want denuclearization to go forward, you need concessions from both North Korea and the United States. And so right now what Moon Jae-in has to do, he has to persuade United States and also persuade his ally Japan to make meaningful concessions, such as, if not ending the Korean War, at least lifting some sanctions, such as a travel ban. And so I don't think the visuals are going to impress the Trump administration or Shinzo Abe administration into making these concessions. I completely agree with what Professor Jiro from Japan said, that many Japanese feel that we're being left out in the cold, that President Moon embracing Kim Jong-un means that North Korea, South Korea, China, we're going to make this grand trilateral alliance against Japan, maybe even against the United States. So these are not the kind of visuals or message that Japanese and USA governments are looking for. And number three, what Professor Chen said, I completely agree that China wants to say in the negotiations, all the concerned parties, China, Russia, Japan, USA, they want a voice in the negotiations, because each of these major countries exercise veto power over any meaningful peace. And the most important thing is building trust between the different parties. I would urge the Moon Jae-in administration, maybe less public visuals, more behind-the-scenes negotiations, behind-the-scenes developing of individual trust between the leaders of the major countries.
Okay, let's hear what the experts have to say more. Let's go back and glean more information from our panel of guests. Harry, how do you think Kim's Seoul visit before his meeting with President Trump will affect the upcoming Kim-Trump summit?
It sets the stage. I mean, that's the biggest thing. President Moon has really put forward a really amazing agenda to try and solve this North Korean issue through, really trying to improve inter-Korean relations, but also essentially being the head diplomat, as such as a go-between Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un, which is a really, really hard task. So obviously, inter-Korean relations are going to be at the forefront of a Moon-Kim Jong-un summit. But what President Moon is most likely going to be doing as well is taking messages from President Trump to Kim, trying to explain what the agenda would be, and probably trying to broker some sort of deal where there'd be a down payment on denuclearization. And I think we already know what the deal is. I mean, at the third inter-Korean summit, Kim Jong-un put forward an idea that they would either close or allow inspections at the Yongbyon nuclear facility for what's been called corresponding measures. I think what we need to figure out is what those corresponding measures are from the United States. And once we can get that all ironed out, I think that allows us to have that successful Trump-Kim summit and really break this détente open and make it something that's lasting and self-sustaining.
Harry, and speaking of the deal, what kind of deal in regards to the denuclearization do you think Kim Jong-un will bring this time when he sits down with President Moon?
Sure. I mean, I think there's a lot of misinformation in the media about what Kim Jong-un has promised and what can happen going forward. I think we have to keep in mind the declarations that were set up in the Singapore summit between Trump and Kim were vague, and they were vague on purpose because the United States and North Korea have to really develop the foundations of trust. I mean, there's no way that we can expect Kim Jong-un to give up his nuclear weapons, and basically surrender for getting nothing in return. I think we have to think of this as a transaction where one party gives something in order to get something. I mean, that's the foundation of international politics or even business, to be honest with you. So I think if we accept that as sort of the reality, I think you can get to a point where you can start understanding what Kim might want. And I think what he's going to want is he's going to want to set up some sort of normalization of relations to get to the bigger things. How do you do that? Well, I think it's pretty simple. I think you need to have a peace declaration ending the Korean War. I mean, let's face reality here. That is not a concession. The North Korean and South Korean troops are not shooting at each other at the moment. There is peace. There's nothing wrong with admitting what the reality is. And I think that's big for Kim Jong-un because it allows him to go back to Pyongyang and say, I'm the North Korean leader that ended this war. And we have to remember how deeply ingrained the Korean War is in North Korean psychology. If you give him that, it gives him the ability to make concessions on his own. And I think it allows him to maybe allow international inspectors in, maybe give us a nuclear dossier to see how big his actual program is, to figure out how you would denuclearize North Korea. So I think we have to set up the conditions for success. We can't just go to Kim Jong-un and say, denuclearize first and then we'll drop sanctions. That's a way to end this very quickly and maybe go back to fire and fury, which is something we don't want.
Now back to Professor Chang. Now that the trade disputes between Washington and Beijing have subsided since the two presidents met on the sidelines of the G20 summit, do you think Kim's visit to Seoul will have an even more positive effect on U.S.-China relations?
If the visit to Seoul on the part of Kim Jong-un is to be materialized, then certainly it will mean that the United States is interested in the progress in the inter-Korean relationship. The Donald Trump administration will closely monitor the situation, the progress, so as to decide whether there is going to be a second U.S.-North Korea summit soon, and even an invitation to Kim Jong-un to visit the United States. Because after all, President Donald Trump is eager to complete the denuclearization process without making the concessions that he would not like to make. And this is probably considered an important diplomatic success for his re-election bid. So in this connection, certainly the Donald Trump administration would not like interferences from Beijing, and people probably hope that Beijing will contribute and facilitate the entire process. And I believe China will be ready to help. But this is only one of the factors affecting Sino-American relations, and this is not going to have much impact on the Sino-American trade negotiations.
Professor Takai, if the mood of peace and reconciliation between the two Koreas were to strengthen after Kim's visit to Seoul, do you think that it will also help improve North Korea-Japan relations?
Hopefully it would. Hopefully it would. But perhaps South Korea is paying more attention toward North-South relations than Japan-Korea relations. And in that sense, there's going to be some negative sentiment in Japan toward the Koreans in general, both North and South. And how they going about this will result in some of the attitudes of the Japanese people toward both Koreas. And I just hope that it's not going to be that bad. But the way things are going, there's a couple incidents that Moon Jae-in have created toward Japan that the Japanese people do not like. And one of those was the repatriation of forced laborers, and the other was the dissolution of the Foundation for the Comfort Women.
Thank you all for being here with us. Harry Kazianis from Washington, D.C., Professor Jiro Takai from Nagoya, and Professor Joseph Chang from Hong Kong. Now, Professor Takai mentioned about pending issues between South Korea and Japan. One was the dissolution of the Japan-funded foundation on the comfort women issue, as well as the forced labor of the South Korean laborers during the wartime in Japan. So all these issues, do you think will be solved or somewhat eased when the inter-Korean relations perhaps get better? What do you think?
I think it depends on how inter-Korea relations develops. For example, because right now, from Japan's perspective, the South Korean government is stressing all the human rights violations of the Japanese government in the past, such as the comfort women and the forced labor. On the other hand, the Moon Jae-in government never mentions the human rights concerns of the Japanese government, such as 17 Japanese citizens who were abducted by North Korea. This is a very important issue because this is something that happened recently. Some of the abductees still live in North Korea, but President Moon, a human rights lawyer, never mentions these Japanese citizens who are abducted and still live in North Korea. And if this continues, then inter-Korea relations, reconciliation, will not provide any benefits to Japan.
Okay, and there isn't a whole lot of process or progress made in the denuclearization talks ever since the first inter-Korean summit and the landmark North Korea-U.S. summit. But do you think this is maybe perhaps a reason why Kim Jong-un should be coming to Seoul? What's your thought on that?
I'm hoping that small steps, big steps can lead to better understanding and trust. At the same time, I want to stress that this is a multiplayer game. It's not just North Korea, South Korea. Dr. Harry Kazianis has mentioned that Moon Jae-in considers himself to be like a head diplomat, a messenger between North Korea and the United States. And messenger is an important role. But I think right now what North Korea needs is not a messenger, but somebody who can be a persuader, an influencer to the Trump administration. So I think President Moon Jae-in, what North Korea needs is leaders who can work as influencers and persuaders, not just as messengers.
Okay, thank you very much for your insights today. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having me.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un's visit to Seoul and its impact is of great interest not only to South Korea, but also to the regional powers. We hope to hear some good news on this front that can meet the growing expectations of the positive outcome. That's all we have for this week's The Point World Affairs. Thank you for tuning in and see you again next week.